So good evening. How's everybody doing tonight? Oh, I hear you. I want to hear everybody else. How's everybody doing tonight? Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for braving LA traffic and coming out on a Thursday evening. On behalf of KPCC and LAist, thank you for joining us for this evening's program here at LA 84. My name's John Cohn. I'm the managing producer of KPCC In Person, which is KPCC In Person. It's very clever, isn't it? It's the live programming platform for public radio station and NPR affiliate KPCC. So in addition to our radio and digital news service, we also do live events, a range of them, in fact. Live broadcasts with our radio shows, a variety of presentations and performances at theaters around town, and community conversations on very important topics like the one we're going to talk about this evening. To learn more about us and some of the events we have coming up, I encourage you to check out kpcc.org in person. And when you're there, if you haven't already, you can sign up for our newsletter. Tonight, we're talking about Black infant mortality and what opportunities exist to address the disparities in that space. Our senior early childhood reporter, Priska Neely, has been reporting extensively on this topic for about a year. Last summer, she produced a series of stories that we have published on kpcc.org, so I highly encourage you to check that out. They have been widely read, distributed, and shared and talked about. Priska appeared on a range of news programs across the country, raising awareness about this ever-timely, sadly, and complex issue. Tonight, we're very glad to be able to continue this important conversation with you. Speaking of, we want to hear from you. On your chair, there was probably a little slip of paper that said Connect with KPCC. We encourage you to fill that out. This allows us to reach out to you on topics that you consider yourself an expert on as we report on related stories. It's confidential. We don't share this information. We hold your contact information very dearly. But most importantly, your participation with us allows us to do a better job in our reporting by connecting you to directly inform the accuracy and the extent of our coverage on a range of topics. So please, if you're willing, we actively invite you to complete those forms. Some quick housekeeping for tonight. As a news organization, we are audio recording and live video streaming, so you can use your devices, but please put them on silent mode, maybe lower your screen brightness. Photos are okay, but please, 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 no video or audio recording. Believe me, we got that covered. And we invite you to join us on social media using #BlackBabies. If I've missed anything, or you have any questions about KPCC or anything else, I invite you to come talk to me or any of my colleagues from KPCC after the show. We'd really like to speak with you. But for now, without further ado, please join me in welcoming your host for the evening, Priska Neely.
Hello, hello. Hi. It's great to be here and in such a full room. This event has been on my mind for a long time, so I'm glad that this night is finally here. As John said, you can connect with us on social. I know we've got a lot of people watching online too, so at KPCC in person and #BlackBabies. So tonight we're going to be talking about some difficult topics: loss, racism, stress. So I want to just start out by having everyone take a deep breath. So let's do that together. I know I needed that, so let's do it again. Okay. So I cover early childhood for KPCC. So I'm doing stories for the radio and for online about programs, funding, policies that affect young children and families. And I started doing this specific coverage area about 1.5 years ago. So at that time, I was going to a lot of different conferences. I was just trying to learn what people in this space were talking about. So I ended up at one conference, Maternal Mental Health Now, and there was a breakout session on the topic of Black infant mortality. And that's where I first heard the statistic that in the United States, Black babies are twice as likely to die in their first year of life. Twice as likely to die before the age of 1. And I know it's dark in here, but I want to see if I can kind of gauge the room. Who in this room had heard that statistic kind of like unrelated to this event, unrelated to my coverage before, if you just want to raise your hands. Okay, So from what I can see, a good number of people, some of you may have a personal experience, some of you may work in this space, but I had never heard that before. You know, as a Black woman, I was surprised that I'd never heard about that until a year and a half ago. So I'm sitting there listening to this presentation. I hear this statistic: Black babies are twice as likely to die. Then I learned that it's not just about income, not just about education, not just about behavior like smoking, not just about access to prenatal care. A college-educated Black woman is still more likely to lose her baby than a white woman who didn't finish high school. So the leading cause is prematurity. Black babies are born too early, too small, they don't make it. And when I heard that part of it, I immediately realized that my family is part of that statistic. My sister Nicole lost 2 babies when she was about 6.5 months into her pregnancy. And my sister Lakeisha had my nephew 2 months premature. Now, he's fine. He's 11. He's about to turn 12. I love him dearly. But that's not the case for thousands of Black babies nationally each year. And in LA County, with the current rates, we're talking about 70 or 80 Black babies that die each year just in this county. And even though the overall rate of infant mortality is low in California, the racial gap between Black and white is actually bigger here. So Black babies are 3 times as likely to die than white babies. So when I was learning about this, I called my sisters and I told them what I learned, because I was like, did you guys realize that, you were part of this much bigger issue? And they had no idea. They'd never heard that, even though they had personal experience. I ended up interviewing my sisters for some of the stories that I did. And something that Nicole said to me really stuck out. She said, I'm just not sure that we're aware that this is an issue beyond just our bodies. And this gap is not new. It's been true for decades. One of the things that astounded me in my reporting on this was reading a transcript of a congressional hearing from 1984, more than 30 years ago, called Infant Mortality Rates, Failure to Close the Black-White Gap, more than 30 years ago. With advances in medicine, prenatal care, care for premature babies, fewer babies are dying today, but that gap is still there. So what's in that gap? Over the years, policy approaches to addressing this issue have kind of evolved from being very blame-focused, focused on the behavior of the mom, then to questioning genetics, and then to where we are now, looking at the social factors that contribute to this issue, and specifically the role of chronic stress and racism, and the lived experience of being a Black woman in the United States. So it's not race, it's racism. Institutional racism and how certain communities have been steered away from resources, but also interpersonal. As one expert told me, the hypothesis around Black women is such that because we never know when we're going to experience discrimination of racism, we're always on. We're always trying to protect against it. And that inability to control between fight, flight, and freeze puts women in a near constant state of stress. That chronic stress leads to the deterioration of health as Black women age, and during pregnancy, which is already a stressful time, plays out in birth outcomes. Now, all of that, everything that I've just said, is very stressful. And sometimes, and when I was reporting on this, it really feels insurmountable. My stories looked at the history and what communities are trying to do to fix this on a policy level. I talked to public health officials in LA County because the county is really focused on this right now and really focused on calling out racism as a factor. But when the stories came out, I heard from Black women who were excited to have learned about this, excited to be informed. But I talked to one woman in particular who, I didn't know this at the time, but she just found out that she was pregnant. And she said that she was really glad to be informed about this, but she wanted to know what she could do to protect herself and her baby. And that was part of the inspiration for this event tonight, to raise awareness, but also to tackle that question. even though we know that it's not just about behavior, it's not just about the individual, and it's not about blame, there are things that women can do to empower themselves in and out of the doctor's office during pregnancy and in life. And so that's what we're going to talk about tonight. And thank you all so much for being here. I want to bring up our first guest, Reyna Granberry, if you'll come on up and join me. So Reyna Granberry is a mother, maternal child health advocate, and program manager with Black Women for Wellness. And if you have checked out the stories online, if you've gotten the postcards, the various ways we've been promoting this event, you've seen her face. You've heard her voice in my radio stories. And you may know a little bit about her story, but I just want to talk for you to share a little bit about your story and tell us about your first pregnancy and where you were in your life.
Okay. As Friska said, I'm Reyna Granberry. I am a native to Los Angeles, born and raised in LA, grew up in Inglewood, went off to college, Spelman College, Spelman. And I came back, I'm doing everything that I'm told to do. And, I've got a supportive boyfriend at the time, and I find out I'm pregnant. And we're very excited, we're very happy. And the very first thing I said is, I live in Inglewood, right? I'm like, I ain't going to no Inglewood clinics. I ain't going to no Inglewood hospital. I'm gonna go to the fancy hospital down in Beverly Hills. I'm going to the fancy doctor in Beverly Hills. I'm getting the best service, like the rich white women, and I'm gonna have me a healthy, happy baby. That's what I'm gonna do. So that was my plan. Along that journey, I started noticing something was really wrong with my pregnancy around maybe about almost entering into my 4th month. I was spotting a little bit and just always cramping, and I just felt really uneasy. There was something in my intuition saying, something isn't right. So I would go to my doctor, and I noticed, again, I was one of few Black women coming to the office. Like I said, it was in a wealthy neighborhood, and the doctor was turning me in and out within 5 minutes every time. And I would notice I was waiting so long while other women would be in there for like 45 minutes. And this is my first baby, so I just attributed to the fact that I'm healthy, I'm young, I was fit and in shape then. So I was like, this is why I'm getting turned in and out. So I kept, putting out the thoughts of racism in my mind, that's not what's happening here. So I was getting turned in and out every time. I said, I don't feel well. Something's wrong with this pregnancy. Can we do some checks? Like, I wasn't educated, so I'm like, let's check on this. And the doctor continued to tell me I was fine. The last time he told me that I was fine, I went home with cramping, lifted my leg to get in the bed, and my water broke. So the result was me going to the hospital preterm, and at 20 weeks, delivering a baby who was underdeveloped, had no lungs developed, and therefore stillborn. And it was devastating. It was an extremely traumatic event to leave, to have someone take the baby away, and the baby's never coming back. That'll be your last time seeing the child. So do you want me to go into being empowered and...
Yeah, Yeah, I just, listening to you speak, and I've heard you tell this story many times before, and, one of the things about this is that you have turned this into your life's work, sharing your story. But it is trauma, and it is serious loss. And it's something that a lot of times people don't talk about.
Absolutely.
And so, once you did start talking about it, were there others in your life who shared stories as well?
Absolutely. So, like I said, I went to complete devastation, depression, all types of things. And then as soon as I was able to talk to people, everybody said, same thing happened to me. I had an aunt that I didn't even know who told me she lost several babies. And and I'm so close to this aunt, we never talked about it. Friends started telling me, cousins started telling me, and I was in complete disbelief that we had never, ever had these conversations. It boggled my mind. So, yeah, I just continue to tell the story and meet more people.
And it was striking to me also when I had your story on the radio and my sister heard it, your story and her story were so similar. And so many of the stories are so similar. But once you had that experience, you sought out more information about what went wrong. And you learned, because at that point you didn't know either that you were part of a larger statistic. So how did you learn that?
I absolutely did not. I just started looking on the internet because I didn't know that I wanted to have another child. So I knew that I could not, if I had to go through that again, I may not make it out. It was just that devastating to me. So I just started looking up support groups and different types of things. And my mother was actually involved with doing some volunteering and assisting with Great Beginnings for Black Babies. So I knew about that, but never even asked her about it. So then I looked into Great Beginnings for Black Babies, and they had a social support and empowerment class that was helped usher in through the county, and I got involved there as as a mom, going there for support, going there to learn and see how can I empower myself, how can I advocate for myself next time, where else should I go if I'm not going to go to the best providers in Beverly Hills? Where do I go? Who's going to protect me and make me feel safe and help me have a healthy baby? So I was a part of that program, and although I did still experience, I had another preterm birth. This time at 27 weeks, I was still a Black woman in a stressful situation with a toxic job, and it happened again. But I had the social support, I had the advocates, I was connected to all these different people and doulas and folks who could support me and just get me through the hump. So although I had a preterm baby, we made it. My 27-year-old baby is 6 years old. He was in the NICU for 2 months. I was in the hospital for 2 months before I had him.
And then your third was full term.
So
right?
now after my second baby, I'm ready now. I know everything. I'm talking to folks. I'm getting everything together. And it really is a journey to continue to learn and continue to be connected, because my third child was only born 6 days early. She was a full-term baby just about. Third time's a charm, right?
Yeah.
And she's happy and healthy. And the reason why I'm where I am now at Black Women for Wellness, doing the work that I did, I also worked with the Black Women Health Program, is because now my child's legacy, I didn't be able to have that child, but the legacy is to make sure that I can make at least a couple Black mothers have safe and sacred births.
Mm-hmm. One thing that you said to me before was that, had you had any of that information before, you would have 3 children and not
I would
2.
have 3 children. I'm absolutely sure. I'm positive. Nothing can change my mind about that, because I'd be aware that it had nothing to do with me. I was being discriminated against, and I wasn't being listened to, and I was being ignored. And if I knew then what I know now, my doctor wouldn't have been able to get me out of the doctor in 5 minutes. And if he did, I'd be right next to the next doctor. I'd be going to look for midwife Debbie Allen or to Dr. LaTanya Hines. I would not sit there and allow myself to be discriminated against and end up having the situation that I had.
Mm-hmm. I want to thank you so much, Reyna, for being here and for sharing that. And we're going to have a time for questions at the end, but at this point, I just want to see if there's anyone else. You spoke to, what you wish you had known and what you want other women to know, and yours was really about, having those supports and advocating for yourself in the doctor's office. And I just want to know if there's anyone else. We want to keep these brief because we do want to bring up and discuss some of these topics with the rest of our panel. But if anyone has just what they wish they had known, what they would like others to know, if you've had some experience with this issue yourself, if you would just want to raise your hand, we'll come to you with a microphone. Cool.
Thank you. Oh, good evening, everybody. Hi, Reyna. Hi, Priska. My name is Dana Sherrod. I'm really grateful to be here. I think what I wish that I would have known or had a different experience. I just gave birth about 4.5 months ago, and I unfortunately experienced a life-threatening emergency in delivery. myself and my baby, our life was at risk within a matter of minutes. We were really down to the wire. But when you're in these very traumatic and very vulnerable moments, it's so important. I echo, Reyna, just what you were saying. It's so important to have someone in the space that's there to advocate on your behalf, whether it's a family member, whether it's doula support. But it's so critical because working for a Black women's organization and doing this work and knowing the data, I was still very vulnerable and very afraid. And so, I am so grateful to be here and so grateful to have a healthy baby. But for our sisters out there and for women in general, it's so important to have someone in your corner with you in those moments. So thank you.
Thank you, Dana. Anyone else? I cannot see. Okay,
At all.
I see.
At all. Yay. Yeah, they are.
Yeah, and if you just want to say your name and where you live.
Hi, my name is Gloria Debsman, and I live in Baldwin Vista. And I had my first child 31 years ago at 37, almost 38 years of age, okay? My question is, and you may want to address it later, is when you're in delivery and the baby has the cord wrapped around, how do you tell a managed care place that maybe, or a doctor, maybe you should give me a cesarean so I can save my child, okay? How do you do that? So my child won't have some brain damage from, how do you do that in those critical moments? And maybe you want to address it later.
Yeah.
That's just a thought, okay?
Okay, yeah, no, we definitely will, I wrote that down and we'll get to that during our Q&A part. For now, I just want to, if anyone just has any other kind of words of wisdom, things that you'd wish you'd known, we just want to focus on that for right now.
Okay. Hi, my name is April. I'm from Gardena. So I had my daughter at 31 weeks gestation. And I knew the whole time, just like you mentioned, that something was wrong. So just my bit of advice is to trust your intelligence, trust your intuition, because I knew months before what happened. And it was still an emergency situation, and what I had to battle with was convincing doctors that something was wrong. So trust your intelligence and trust your intuition. That's just my advice, yeah.
Great, thank you so much. Anyone else? Maybe we have time for one more. Okay. Well, thank you so much for sharing those things, and we'll definitely talk about that in the next portion of our conversation. Something that I think about a lot in reporting on this topic is the fact that this is really heavy and that it is really, emotionally disturbing for me to really, it's a personal thing I've been thinking about this for a long time, and I know many people in this room have been thinking about it for much longer. But we did want to try to shed a little bit of light on that this evening. So I think you got a card on the way in, and if anyone has any words of encouragement, if you could write them on those cards, words of encouragement for, women who may not have started families yet, women who may have experienced a loss. If you have any words of encouragement, if you don't, that's completely fine too. But if you have anything, we'd love to collect those, and I'll read a little of them at the end, but we'll also share them in other ways. So if you have any words of encouragement that you want to write on a note card, just kind of wave it, and one of our events team will come and get it. So now I'd like to bring up our next two panelists, Debbie Allen and Dr. LaTanya Hines, if you'll come and join us on stage. Great to have you here. So Debbie Allen is a midwife and owner and clinical director of Tribe Midwifery, and Dr. LaTanya Hines is an OBGYN with Kaiser Permanente. She's also past president of the Association of Black Women Physicians. And I also want to start by asking you kind of a version of what we just talked with some of the audience about, which is, what do you wish, and we'll dig into this more in the conversation, but just kind of a short answer of what do you wish women know? Like what do you want there just be common knowledge in this space. Debbie?
I wish that women knew that you didn't have to take no for an answer.
Dr. Hines?
That's not an easy one. I wish for more access to excellent care. I wish that prenatal care and just access to healthy, well woman care was not so far, it's not a privilege, it is a right. And I feel that everyone should have access to the best care possible. I wish we had that.
Debbie Allen, I want to talk a little bit about the work that you do. We were emailing earlier and you were running a little late because you were finishing up a birth.
I did. A baby came today, so I was running late, and hope I don't have birth bits on me, but yeah, that happened. Exactly. Exactly.
Another thing that I've been struck by in talking to people about this issue for such a long time is how many people have a personal connection to this issue that has driven them into this work. So how did your own experiences in childbirth bring you to midwifery?
So I have 3 sons. My oldest is 26, and he was born in a hospital. I had a OB who was my gynecologist, who, of course, was my OB when I got pregnant and had my son. We spoke a lot about the experiences I wanted in my birth, the natural experience, and just an experience that didn't feel like I was having my baby in a baby factory. I thought she was on the same page with that, but when I went into labor and gave birth, I realized she wasn't. And it just, a lot of things happened during my birth that weren't on my birth plan and weren't a part of what I wanted to happen. But what stood out most for me was birth did not feel special. It didn't feel sacred. It was, people in and out of my room having conversations about their weekend, and those things just didn't resonate for my own personal experience. I know you see a lot of babies come through here, but you've never seen my son, So that was really important for me the next time I got pregnant to look for a different experience. And I hired a midwife and had my next 2 sons at home, and just the amount of time that they spent with me and how the care that I was given, really, that's why I became a midwife.
And so, one thing I noticed looking at your website, Tribe Midwifery, it's right there. The statistics about Black infant mortality are, forefront and, part of the mission of the work that you do. So just talk a little bit about the support that you provide as a midwife.
So as a midwife, midwifery is just a little bit different because we have time to spend with our patients. So by the time they have their baby, I know them well and they also know me. There's a level of trust that's there. They don't feel judged in their decisions. Everything is about informed consent. So that means every test that you get, every recommendation that I give, you get information on it. We discuss it. We discuss what feels right for your family. Nothing is imposed on you. You have the right to make the choices for your family that work for your family. And so I think just involving people in their care in that way makes them more conscientious of what they want and makes them more in touch with their body, because for a normal, healthy, pregnant woman, you're not sick. So it's really important that you pay attention to what's happening in your body and don't feel like at the end of your pregnancy, you're glad you made it out alive. You're supposed to make it out alive. Mm-hmm. You're supposed to be okay.
Right.
And it shouldn't be that shouldn't be an abnormal thing. So just looking at pregnancy from that perspective, for me, when I had midwifery care, that was a game changer. And for my clients, I feel that that's huge. And I feel that they tell me things that maybe they wouldn't feel comfortable telling their OB because they trust me and they don't feel like there's any judgment in that. Yeah. I'm looking in them in their eye. I'm not writing on my chart.
Because we are focused on infant mortality tonight, but in terms of maternal mortality, the rates are 3 to 4 times higher for Black women than white women, and that's true in California as well as the rest of the country. So, in the category of horrifying statistics, that's the other side of this. Both connected to the issues that we're talking about. Dr. Hines, in terms of personal experience that connects you to this work, talk a little bit about that.
Well, I come from, first and foremost, from a background of being born to a single parent who was 18 when she had me. I'm just not too far from where I grew up on 45th and Western. Had it not been for, say, the busing program to give me the opportunity to go to school in a different area, Brentwood to Palisades to UCLA, I know that I would not be a physician, and more importantly, certainly not the OBGYN that I am today. But I also come from a parent who had a stroke at 27 from taking birth control pills, and clearly a physician who wasn't listening, with an underlying history of hypertension, and unfortunately she had a stroke. So from age 8 up until she learned how to walk and talk again, I watched the healthcare community and what they provided for her. I didn't know that many, many moons later that I would be a new mom, first-year resident at King Drew Medical Center in preterm labor at 24 weeks. I was an OBGYN resident. I don't think you can get more knowledgeable, right, about obstetrics and gynecology. And yet here I was with access to healthcare and education and a statistic. Hypertension, the whole nine. And true enough, from a mental wellness standpoint, I don't necessarily recommend residency. But I felt like, I thought that I was being taken care of. I thought that my African-American OBGYN, who is amazing, was taking good care of me. But I also recognized there are assumptions made about us as women that perhaps are not applicable to everyone. But what I learned is that that underlying history of hypertension, that I was in denial, that when it was addressed the second time, not only did I went to 38 weeks the first time with growth restriction and hypertension and all the complications associated with it. But the second time, I was clear that this is not going to happen. Same doc, a lot more advocating for my own health, on medication from the beginning with a full extra term. We went beyond dates this time. She's in the back of the room right now. So that's an 18-year-old and a 20-year-old, almost 21. I live it. I understand it. I think also that I want to say that I am a partner in the healthcare of my patients. I'm not someone that's not trying to make sure that you don't get out or you are marginal trying to get out alive. I don't believe in that. And those who have had me as a physician, I know they know that to be true, that I am in front of you, but more importantly, standing beside you, trying to make sure that the outcome that you expect is what you get. And we have 5 or 6 midwives, and I'm very grateful to Kaiser and what we do to empower women, all women, with regard to the care that we give. So with midwives in combination with physicians, knowing those who are lower risk and those who don't need much intervention and those who perhaps need more, that we're all working together with access and, more importantly, excellent quality health care to make sure that they get the outcomes that they want. I probably see more patients who want a more non-interventional, holistic approach to their delivery, which I think all delivery should be. I want to say that again. I am there, honestly, almost as a coach when I am taking care of you. But if I find something that I think the intervention is going to give you a better outcome, that's my job to make sure that that happens. So I am not in, sometimes people think with the midwives that we're in opposition. No, we are partners in making sure that you get the outcome that we expect you to get.
You mentioned the assumptions, and should say that majority of OBGYNs are white. It's more like 75%.
Oh, I'm a unicorn, yes. Yeah, yeah.
So talk a little bit more about those assumptions and the assumptions that were made about you, but more broadly that are made about Black women.
There's a movement called Black Lives Matter. There's no question that all lives matter, but when we talk about lives matter, that has everything to do with if I walk in the room and you're not language congruent, or we're not perhaps of the same sex, or we can't make a connection, the likelihood that you'll listen to anything that I have to say is unlikely. The assumption that somehow or another, because of just the color of my skin, that somehow I don't understand what it is that you're talking about, or that I'm not capable of understanding. That because I am Medi-Cal and not a private patient, that somehow I don't deserve to be treated the same way that all patients should be treated. That is a problem. That is clearly racism. It is bias, in both the workplace, it is bias in our healthcare institution. We can go way back. But the most important thing is that there are a few, less than 1% of all physicians in this country are African American, and less than half that number are African American and female. And if we say those who are in surgical subspecialties, we start to get minuscule in who we are. We're unicorns. But it is important to know that we are there and that we have lots of advocates that look just like us, but more that don't, that want to make sure that you get a healthy outcome. So what are the assumptions? We've got to get better. And by being part of the School of Medicine, the new KP School of Medicine, the foundation is on making sure that there is the diversity of thought, of belief, of education, of skill, to make sure that we're doing our part in KP to provide the kind of care that people expect from us with quality. When patients say, I've been there 5 minutes, it makes me feel bad. When patients wait an hour to see me, I feel bad. But they know that when I sit down and listen, that's their time. I am not going to shorten their time. And if they need to send me an email, you guys know I will respond. Because this is my community. You look like my mother. You look like my grandmother. I want the outcome you want. When I see you in the supermarket, that's my baby. So I'm invested, and that's all my patients. And for those who know me when I was in Pasadena in private practice, I didn't necessarily see a lot of the patients that looked like me, and yet my patients understood it was the same care. And I love the fact that being at Kaiser, they let me do the same thing that I did in Pasadena, same care. Yeah. So perhaps I'm unicorn-ish, but I believe that I am representing an amazing department of OBGYN, at least at West LA, that is doing their best to make sure that we get excellent outcomes.
Yeah. And there's a survey called Listening to Moms California, and the results found that 1 in 10 Black women reported being treated unfairly during their hospital stay because of their race. Only 1% of white women reported the same. And so that's just kind of another piece of evidence that shows this, these very real feelings that in these experiences. And so I just wanted to talk a little bit about, what do we do with that? What can happen in those moments? Reyna, you spoke a little bit about this earlier, but I'm interested to hear from you more about, when you're feeling that, when you are concerned about having a short period of time, about having your concerns not being heard, about feeling like something is wrong. How do you broach those conversations, and how do you, in the work that you do to educate other women, what do you do?
So it is difficult, especially like you said, both of you all, this is a unicorn experience. And for me, Medi-Cal now, luckily with all the work that all of these birth workers and folks who work in maternal health are doing now, in Medi-Cal you do have access to doulas, and we're working harder to get more of that. But for me, with HMO, I didn't have any access to doula. I couldn't pay for one. So it's a very difficult conversation for me to have when I'm looking in the eyes of someone who's been in school for 9 years and is gonna be like, I know. But luckily for all the women, we want to keep talking about the positivity, because I don't want people to think that this is a doom and gloom situation. You have so many people now that are advocating on your behalf that it's a beautiful thing. Like I said, we've got a whole team that we call the CAT at the county. We've got the March of Dimes, who is now doing focus groups, and another birth equity group that Dr. Joy Perry and Karen Scott put together, where we're actually surveying Black mothers, hearing their experiences. So if you never make it to a doctor, we're gonna take it back to the doctors, and they're creating trainings around implicit bias, and they're gonna take our stories to their colleagues. So we're in a great place as far as that's concerned. Even just me being able to sit here now, I don't have the PhDs and the MDs and the MPHs and the RNs, but I'm here. And so even this conversation is showing Black mothers that their voice is valid and we have a space. So I think that's very important. So you can feel more empowered, and you can know that you have groups to go to and people who are advocating on behalf with, actual policy as well. We've got policy coming down from Kamala Harris, from Holly Mitchell, and we've just got so many people who are concerned with highlighting Black women's voices. And we're gonna make sure We got us, we got all these people. I see folks in the audience who do this work, that we're gonna help you along in that. You don't have to feel alone, and you know where to reach out to, because it's definitely not something that you can do by yourself. If you can, God bless you, you're a strong sister. But most of us need help, and we're here. So I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah, Debbie Allen, how do you talk to women about having those conversations and about that empowerment side?
Well, I think that it can be very intimidating, like you said, going to an OB or any doctor and feeling that they're the expert in this field, right? But I think that you can't be intimidated about something that could be life and death for you. Like, you have to ask questions. You can, a lot of the things that they learn, you can read too. Like, you have to put as much thought and effort to your pregnancy and your birth as you do your wedding, as you do all the major events that mean something to you. You know what I mean? I think we just go into an OB's office. No disrespect to you. I got you. All right. We just go into an OB's office assuming that they have our best interest. And they may, but sometimes you just get lost in the bigness of that. So just asking questions, planning your birth from what you want it to look like backwards, and putting the pieces together to make that happen. Knowing that if you get one healthcare provider that just doesn't feel right for some reason, you don't have to have an answer to why they don't feel right. But just in your gut, something doesn't feel right, change it. Mm-hmm. Like, you can ask for another healthcare provider. When you're in a hospital and you feel unsafe, you can ask for another nurse. You can ask for another OB. You do not have to just accept the care that you get. You have a voice in your own care, and I think we just feel like we don't. We feel like that what you have is what you get, but it really isn't like that. And it's unfortunate, and you should not have to fight when you're trying to have a baby and grow a healthy human. That's not how it should be. But that's the space we're in now. So learning how to navigate a system that is unfair to us is what's going to keep us alive. It's what's going to keep our babies safe. So it's important, and that's not a negative. It's just something that really needs to be done.
Yeah. Reyna's going to ask you a question.
Audra, I need you
coming for my job.
I had the papers and things happen. Audra, I need you to say the woman's name. Is it LaShonda? Yeah, LaShonda Hazard out of Rhode Island. I'm supposed to talk to you guys, but the reason why I wanted to ask you a question is our sister LaShonda Hazard did that. She was brave. She knew something was going wrong with her body. She kept voicing her opinion, and she's on Facebook typing, "I am literally dying." She wrote that on Facebook, and then she died hours later, and her baby died hours later. So,
in a scenario like that, what does it look like?
Because we're asking women to be strong, be powerful, stand in your truth, speak up. And once I've done that, and I'm just here still.
But I think how you do that is also equally important.
Okay.
So like you have to know that if the same doctor is coming to you, giving you the same answer, and that doesn't feel right, you have the right to say, I want to speak to someone else. You do not have to continue your care with someone who doesn't feel right. Like, so if something is happening in your body and they're coming to you with the same answers and those answers don't feel right, you can say, I want to see someone else. And you can keep saying that until you get someone else in there. But that's incredibly hard to do when you are also not well. Right. That's not an easy thing to do, but it sometimes it's your only option. So I just think, like, don't think that the person who's standing in front of you is the last resort for you. You can go further and further and further, and they have to do that. Like, you don't have to accept that. And I think we just feel like, okay, well, my doctor said, I told him again, I'm still not feeling well. Send someone else.
Well, Dr. Hines, in being on the receiving end of that, and I'm not you, because we understand.
Time's me, yes.
We understand the unicorn nature here.
Yes.
But, for others, if you're in the doctor's office, if you have that limited period of time, if you feel like you're not getting the right answers, are there things, is there a way to approach or a way to frame questions that is most effective?
I would say that, being a physician, like I said, I'm a little bit of a unicorn, but if a patient is actively, clearly advocating for their health and they are in contradiction, you are not in agreement with what the physician is saying. How do you navigate that? Tool number one is just as much as the physician is trying to listen, you are also perhaps listening to. You are parroting back what they said, but then more importantly saying, this is why I don't agree. And if the only reason you don't agree is because you don't feel well, that's good enough. And then perhaps, as my grandmother said back in the day, you don't move. You don't move until you get the answer you need or you find someone who can answer. I have seen many a patient on labor and delivery who clearly they were about to send home because she wasn't in active labor. And she said, I don't care what you say, I am not feeling like I'm gonna make it home for whatever the delivery. This happens a lot. Patient says, I'm not going home. Well, we aren't gonna ship you out of that hospital. And most of the time, they're right. I've been in this practice for 18 years. And there's a lot of evidence-based medicine that we practice from the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology. They're our board certifying agency. But the one thing I know about medicine, it doesn't matter how many articles and what school I went to, you know your body better than I do. So when you tell me I don't feel well, I believe you. Sometimes if I can't get the answer, perhaps I believe I'm just not asking the right question. Maybe the workup that I've done is not the appropriate one because I'm asking the wrong question. I'm humble enough to ask for help. I'm humble enough to know that I don't have all the answers. But advocating with a physician, there's no question, talking to my own colleagues can be difficult because of the presumptions that they make about me.
And an extra hard factor of don't move, I mean, angry black woman.
Come on now.
Right? How many of us are afraid to do the
Right.
advocacy because of
Absolutely.
how you could be perceived?
Well, I mean, when I walk in a room, it's clear that I'm just a little more, yes. But I am so supportive of Debbie Allen here because the American College straight says, as a board-certified physician, we are not to talk about home births. We are not to advocate for that. So you won't hear me say it. But if a patient says to me that that's what they want, I'm going to give them the truth that based on what we believe the truth to be, that may not be the wisest decision. How many patients do I know that have somehow come up missing in the last month of pregnancy? And I know they've gone and had a very positive experience as a home birth. And the statistics, there are a few studies, I can't quote them directly, but a low-risk pregnancy is a low-risk pregnancy. It doesn't matter whether you're in a hospital or not. We might make it high risk, some of the interventions. But I do support evidence-based science. I am a physician. So my job, I believe, is to help and guide the more higher-risk patient. Those who are low risk, they don't need me. And many patients want to come and see me, perhaps because we are ethnically congruent, we are sex congruent, but they are so low risk, there's nothing going on. But on the same hand, I understand that I do listen. That's why if you get an appointment, I'm late all the time. I hate it, but it is what it is, because they get their time. So yes, advocate. Yes, know that the system is biased against you. I'm part of the system, I know. And yet, we must be as strong as we can and supportive of one another, that I do the best I can to always have a seat at the table so I'm not on the menu. And that means that all of us, I'm advocating for all of us. So yes, I'm with you. But if you tell me that you had a previous history of a preterm delivery, I am going to talk about 17-hydroxyprogesterone and its potential reduction in another preterm delivery by 30%. I'm going to talk about that I think that you, as a patient with a previous history of hypertension and another pregnancy, should be on a baby aspirin starting at 16 weeks. I'm going to talk about that if you convert to diabetes in the pregnancy, that I want you, more importantly, to follow the diet as closely as possible. And I'm going to do my best not to intervene with a induction unless I feel I have to. I'm not going to cut you for a cesarean section because I got to go play golf or whatever it is you think I'm doing. I am there for you. But that means that this is a two-way relationship. You must do everything you can, because you want to have the best possible outcome. As we talked before, it starts with the vessel from the beginning.
And some of those things that you just rattled off quickly there, I want to just go back because for people who have had a preterm birth already, there are interventions that some doctors may not be aware of.
Absolutely.
So one of them is baby aspirin, and
Right.
one is the progesterone shot
Yes.
that have been shown to.
Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to. We just said that really fast, so I'm familiar with things. So I just wanted to make sure.
If I can add the cervical cerclage.
Absolutely.
And I only throw that out there because it was one of those experiences where I did have to do some research and trust my doctor and also find out for myself that I didn't want the intervention. I wanted to have a home birth, but I got to a point where I had to have that cervical cerclage if I wanted my baby. So I had the surgery. So it's not that surgery is always, interventions are always horrible, but you have to have informed consent and you have to know that it's the best thing for you.
Yeah, Debbie.
But I'd also like to add, I agree 100%. I'm also going to ask, why do you look like that? What happened in your day why are you stressed today? Mm-hmm. How can we support you with that? What's going on with your relationship? How can we support you with that? Why are you coming in my office looking like that today? Let's put everything down and start there first. Because as important as the clinical aspect of a pregnant person needs to be looked at, they also need to be looked at. Who they are, what they're going through, the shoes they're walking in. That contributes to what happens in your pregnancy equally.
Yeah.
So we can't just look at patients from a clinical aspect. We have to look at the whole person. And if you are completely stressed, but I haven't taken the time to really examine if we can help eliminate some of those stressors, then I'm doing a disservice to you as your care provider. So it's just it's the big picture. And I think that piece, because some OBs, they're checking off all the lists and they're doing all that stuff, but the reason you're having issues is because you are stressed out.
Yes.
Walking around in a black body can be stressful as heck. It's amazing, but it's also stressful.
Yeah.
So if we don't at least touch on those things as well, you're missing a huge factor in why black babies are born early.
Absolutely.
Why black women are dying. Like, that is equally important.
Yeah. And a lot of, the conversations that I'm hearing now, not all over the country, but certainly in California, are really focused on the life course and what's happening, not just in that 9 months, but in the whole experience of a lifetime of the woman, and how does that play out during pregnancy?
How does depression play out? How does anxiety play out? And I think amongst the strong black woman, where we are not allowed to be as vulnerable. And then you think about the world on our shoulders taking care of the babies, those who are single parents, or even if you got two parents and one's really not parenting, that you are doing the best you can perhaps to make ends meet. That kind of, we call it mental wellness, and access to services that are going to be able to kind of help spread and share that burden. I'm happy to say that behavioral health is right next door to our department, and that we have what we call gynecoiatry. I made up that word. And that is that
Gynecoiatry.
part of some of the pelvic pain and issues associated with sometimes just, the physical body is an absolute manifestation of the spirit in need, that I need help. And many times I weigh what you tell me and what you share with me, and I'm very privileged to feel, or to be a gynecologist on that side, that you tell me things you would never tell anybody else. And those experiences will color your experience in pregnancy. You will carry that with you as you get closer and closer towards the delivery. When you get through the delivery and the hormonal changes that contribute to your mood changes, including sleep deprivation, it is very difficult to try to kind of navigate this process. And as a first-time mom with very little experience, having a midwife who you can talk to and have a home birth, having someone who says, I do understand, but I also know that my signature is your ticket to, state disability, and whether you can be off work long enough to be able to find the connections necessary, and the lack of resources, whether it's, I love Kaiser, but we're doing our best to try to make sure that we've got people to help. This is a real issue. And we're trying with our different scales to measure the type of depression, but when you look in the face of someone that looks just like you,
who's just crying because the baby hasn't stopped crying for 24 hours, and who the father just left them, or they don't have a job, they're doing the best they can. I don't know the department I can call and say, can you help? But we all can understand and do the best we can to get them in contact with what we need to do. And I think all of us have a responsibility that whether it's your sister, whether it's your mom, that we are that listening person, even if we have nothing to say, but just listening sometimes is what people need.
Yeah. Debbie, we've heard the word doula a few times tonight, and everyone may not want to have a home birth, may not even consider that. But in terms of the support that a doula can provide, first of all, just tell us what a doula is, and then talk about the support and how people could, if they do want that, how could they find one?
So a doula provides emotional, physical support during your labor and prior to you having your baby. So they're the person you can call and ask questions about. They're the person who can direct you to resources you need for your pregnancy and afterwards. So they're the person who are there in your birth to advocate for the experience you want. So to find a doula, really, doulas are really accessible. There's DONA that has a list of doulas. There's several organizations in LA County that you can call and just interview doulas. Medi-Cal offers doula service, reimbursed doulas as well. So yeah, they're easy to find. I think people just don't think that they need, they're like, why would I need this complete stranger at my birth, right? But that person, you're supposed to develop a relationship with that person so that person can help you navigate the medical system when you're laboring and working hard and not being able to fight in that way for what you need.
It feels to me, I don't know if it's just because I've been, reporting on this, but like that there is kind of a shift and more awareness about that option now. Do you feel that way?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you would go to the hospital years ago and people would be like, what, who is that person?
Yeah.
And now when you come in with a birth plan and you have a doula, that's very common. People recognize it. You give them to it, they look at it. So it's definitely very, very, very different.
Yeah. So we touched on this a little bit, but some of this is clinical and some of it is emotional, some of it's social, and some of the solutions are really more in the social space. So Reyna, I wanted you to talk a little bit about finding those social supports, the importance of that, and kind of, sister circles and those type of things that people can seek out for that emotional support.
Absolutely. So, she just mentioned them. So sister circles, we believe, are so important. And I think it's why even like a lot of clinics you go to now talk about centering pregnancy. It's a word that you'll hear a lot. And it's just basically putting you in a room with a bunch of other, and we like, when it's Black women, we want them with other Black pregnant women where you can bounce ideas off of each other. You may be a first-time mom. I might be on my 6th baby. You may your doctor may have mentioned cervical cerclage to you, but didn't explain it. And I can break it down to you in our Inglewood language, what that means, what it felt like for me, and just take a little bit of that ease, of that pain off. And just share all kind of stories. I know I ended up using a service where I saved my placenta and ate it. And I believe it's wonderful and everybody should do it. And the first time I mentioned it in the sister circle, they were like, girl, you crazy. You've been hanging around white folk, we're not doing it, right? And I explained no, and there's all these different ways, and you can get them in pill form, and I had ways for them to get a discount. So that is so, you know me, I'm about the discount. So those things are really important. They're terribly important for women to be a part of those sister circles. And then you have, like I said, like programs like the Black Infant Health Program that are available. It's not income specific. You can go, you can get mental health services. So we are here. And another thing that I want to tell the community too, that I mentioned before, luckily for me, I was talking to Mama Shafia, who is an extraordinary midwife, that I didn't realize that my mother was a doula. My mother was my doula. She would come to the hospital. I was there, paint my toes, paint my nails, rub it. And then, back in the day in the South, they would say, you're fussing over the mother. We're going to fuss over her. But as a community, now that you heard this, fuss over the pregnant women that you know. Fuss over them. Go to their houses. If you can braid their hair. Whatever you can do if you can bring a pie. Like, Debbie just mentioned, that is important. That affects a woman's pregnancy in ways that you don't understand. That was that ancient knowledge that we had, that ancestral knowledge to do those things. So now that you're hearing it, make sure you do it. Not too much pie. Our doctor says,
Not too
maybe
much
you got
pie.
some like gluten-free, keto, low, I don't know. But please, fuss over mothers. As a community, we really need to take this holistic approach to taking care of our women. Some of y'all got cousins and family and friends in here that are pregnant, and you've probably only seen them once during their pregnancy. We can't sit here and cry over statistics when we're not taking care of our own. Okay? So the social support is so important, and it starts with us before you even go out into an agency, though there's many agencies available, and you can find them by calling me.
Yeah, Debbie.
And that you also don't let that stop once they have a baby. Support them after they have their baby. That's equally important. Women have many health issues that they don't even realize are happening to them after they have their baby. So it's really important to do what you're saying when they're home with a baby, and you get this brand new baby and you bring it home and you're like, okay, what do I do with this little person?
Right.
So like that support makes a big difference in not only their physical health, their emotional health, their mental health. So carry that out all the way through.
I want to at least bring up, too, since we come outside of the pregnancy, is breastfeeding. I just got to
I was
get it
just
out
going to
there.
ask about. You just took that out of my brain. Yes.
All right. This is liquid gold. I am a believer that there is no better food for a baby than breast milk. However, I am not the person who's going to beat you down if you don't breastfeed. But I believe that some of the misconceptions about breastfeeding started long before you got pregnant, and it's a process by which you do have to learn how to do it, but once you learn, it's a rewarding experience for both you and the baby. Clearly, the baby's getting good nutrition. You're always ready. The food is always available. It's cheap in the sense that it's expensive of your time, but it is cheap to make. But also, we are... African American women are we are the earth. We are the beginning of civilization. I believe it. And so this was not new to us. Breastfeeding is not new. It's not something that's done in Santa Monica and, it's the Lotus Brook. No, we are the mothers of the earth. We used to wet nurse. I've got issues with it. But anyway, the key is we are the salvation for our own babies. So if you happen to have a higher risk pregnancy, what better to be able to provide at least the most nutritious food for the baby post-delivery? We have breastfeeding classes that are coming up specifically for African American women at KP. We just started that initiation. And then more importantly, the postpartum group. That is a real experience. I call it the fourth trimester, and I know you know what I'm talking about, Debbie, is that it didn't start because you just had this baby. That is a whole new beginning for you, the next 3 months of trying to figure out how to navigate the world with one baby, two baby, three babies, a husband looking at you, the dishes looking at you, the job calling you, and you got to figure it out. And postpartum gives you that freedom in that class to talk about how can I make this better and how can I navigate this, and no, there's nothing wrong with you. No, if you feel like crying in the middle of the day because you just can't make it no more. No, this is normal. And I think that they need that safe space, and we're doing our best to provide that. I have to put in a plug for Kaiser because it is making a huge difference in the lives of our patients.
Well, thank you for touching on that, because we are focused on kind of the prenatal side of it, but there are so many other disparities when we're looking at that first year of life, and Black women being much less likely to breastfeed for a variety of reasons, including work demands and stereotypes, but also the risks of sudden infant death syndrome. And in looking at this issue in other parts of the country, it's interesting to see the conversations in the Midwest or the South are really focused on like safe sleep and breastfeeding, and really not talking about the racism piece of it as much yet.
Racism even comes into play with breastfeeding because whose bodies are more sexualized?
Right. Mm-hmm.
you know. So I mean, it plays in all aspects. But that's another thing about a community at large. So while everybody's sitting in here, you gotta know right now, we gotta desexualize. We can't be staring at people and telling them to cover up and just give that this is all of us.
This has been an amazing conversation, and I do want to give people in the audience a chance to ask questions. We had the question earlier about, I don't know if you feel like that was addressed, or do you want to ask it again? Oh, hold on one second.
You want me to stand up? Oh, sure. I'm real tall. Okay. Of course, I'm now 68 years of age, so, and I had my children late, and I didn't feel too badly about it because my mother told me that her mother had her at 35 years old. My mother would be over 100 years old if she were still living, because she had me at 37, and she had my brother at her first child at 27, which was kind of old at that time. But I had a wonderful doctor from Kaiser. His name was Hans Peters. At Sunset, and he watched me doing, and I was always asking him questions, but he said, "You're a lawyer, Gloria, aren't you?" And I said, "Yeah." And I said, "Yeah." And I'm going here and there doing workers' comp. He said, "You know something? Your blood pressure's up a little high, and it just doesn't look right." He said, "Let me talk to your boss." So he called my boss, and he told him, "Send that woman home. Send her home. You don't want to be responsible for her losing a baby." And I was really kind of pissed because I said, shoot, I want to have more time off with my child. But that was the best thing that ever happened, you know, because I had a healthy son.
Wow.
But what I was asking about is, and Dr. Hines said, if there's intervention needed, then she would tell her patient and discuss it with him.
Yeah.
Dr. Peters had an African-American nurse named Zetta Robinson who was always kind of the extra ear for African-American women. And I thank you as a physician and an African-American woman. I have two nieces that are physicians, and but I do thank you as an OBGYN for trying to protect black women. And I thank you, Miss Debbie, for being that beautiful midwife, and you, sister, for trying to be that wonderful advocate. So I am so glad that my daughter drugged me here.
Oh, thank you for being here. Okay, we want to get to some other questions. Go ahead and raise your hand. We'll come to you. We got one in the back here.
Hi, Danica Jameson. I live in Baldwin Vista, and oh, I got it, baby. Oh, thank you. So I am the mother of 6. I bore 4 myself, and I didn't have any of the issues that you guys are discussing, and I kind of feel like a unicorn in that regard because I was lucky. But I did do I'm educated, I'm gonna get the black OBGYN, and then he tried to rush me to go play golf on my first birth, and then I've had a cesarean, and then VBAC, and then cesarean, planned cesarean. So first one was emergency. So I've had children every way possible, but they've all extremely healthy, full term. And I can't help, after listening to everyone today, to question, what do we do before for young black women? Because in my mind, I'm always like thinking of how do we solve problems? So I'm saying immediately professional development for the 99% of OBGYNs that don't look like us. Professional development for them so that when they see young black women as 16-year-old girls that come in for their first pelvic exams, they're empowering them with information, and they're telling them, you're part of this bigger issue, this macro issue, and that down the line, this is something that you need to consider. So down the line, you need to consider your whole health. And so my question stems around, what does that look like for professional development for the medical community? What does that look like for professional development or outreach before they become pregnant.
Right, yeah.
But, how do we give them that voice and teach them advocacy as a young adult, as a young woman, so that it's not so overwhelming when I do have a child. I already know what medical advocacy
Right.
looks like beforehand.
Well, I'm sure, Reyna, you can talk a little bit about that and the outreach that you do, and Dr. Hines, we can also talk a little bit about implicit bias training and work that you do with. So, Reyna, you want to start?
Sure, absolutely. At Black Women for Wellness, that's specifically why we start talking about reproduction to young girls in middle school. It's a tough thing to do with some parents because they don't want you talking to their 12-year-old about sex. Or they don't want you. In some cases, we talking to 10-year-olds about it. But you're absolutely right. Even if we can't talk to them about sex, we talk up to them about reproduction. We actually did a study where we found out just for me, perms are the absolute worst thing that could ever be on a Black girl's body. There were there was more toxic chemicals in those perms than in any other personal care product that a young Black girl can use. And then we wonder why they get older and they're having these issues with their reproductive care. So there's a whole approach that, and you're absolutely right, there's so many factors that play into it and so many attacks on Black women's bodies, starting when they're girls. So that's part of the outreach that we do. And like I said, when we talk about intergenerational, starting at reproductive age, we're trying to educate, empower all that young Black women from young, but then we're also going after the companies and all this because somebody's got to handle that side of it too.
And Dr. Hines, you do go to med schools and have conversations with students who are starting off, and a large part of the solutions to this, both in LA County, but also you mentioned Kamala Harris has proposed legislation around implicit bias training to make at the medical student level as well, to make people aware of the different prejudices that they have that could affect their, the treatment that they provide. So what do you tell med students?
Well, I teach a course at UCI College of Medicine, my alma mater, every year called Women in Medicine, and specifically African American women in medicine. And they have a subset on Muslim women, Jewish women, and not that women are different, but culturally, what they bring to the healthcare arena is different, and how you address the same issues and how effective you are. And one of the things when I'm talking to my students is that a 24 years young patient who is presenting with lower abdominal pain and a recent history of, say, an STD exposure does not need you to judge her that she made a decision that was not as wise. She clearly knows that. She is not to be treated any differently from the 24-year-old who just perhaps graduated from USC and happens to look very different, because even though their backgrounds are different, they make some of the same choices. And that means that they should be treated the same. But you would find time and time again that the woman who's 24 and is in the ER for the same complaint is treated so very differently, as if she's dirty, as if somehow or another she was not worthy of the kind of care that the other student just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Somehow or another, it's just unfortunate. It's unfortunate for the two of them. And so how does that come about? Well, prior to actually even getting into medical school, you've got ideas about what you think people are. And I can only just interject at a point where you're in your training that let us look at the diagnosis and the plan of management, treat them both the same way, make the connection. How are you feeling today? What's bothering you the most? Tell me about what happened, and do it in a non-judgmental manner. That helps a lot. We're all judgy. We love to judge. But ultimately, that does not help your quality of care. So in that sense, from the student level, and also a group I run through Association of Black Women Physicians called Sister to Sister. We start from the undergrad level through medical students, residents, and fellows, that connection between that next step up, trying to make sure that women that look like you are paving the way and pulling up as they move forward. And that means that we lay the foundation throughout LA County, throughout Southern California, and throughout the country for letting students know that there is an absolute opportunity in medicine for you, that you can apply the kind of medicine in the communities where you want to train. It doesn't matter where you want to practice, but that all people are equal. And when I say that
lives matter. That means that I matter, and that my children matter, and that their ability and opportunities in life matter, and that all of us are working in our own way, wherever we are, to make sure that the opportunities are there. And so whatever you can do is being more positive, and like I said, listening as best you can, and knowing that, the physician is not your enemy, but there's no question, if you come across as you don't care, you don't. You've already been judged. You don't care. And therefore, the student or the person's not going to listen, knowing they need the treatment. So we've got to get better about that.
Okay. I want to get to some more questions because I know we have a lot, so if you could just keep them brief, that'd be great.
Hi.
Say your name and say your name and where
My
you're
name
from.
is Sierra Smith. I live in Inglewood. I think we're supposed to say where we live.
Hi.
I think that the advice about self-advocacy is incredibly important. The thing that I kind of feel is missing is the accountability on the sides of the hospitals and the system. And I'm wondering, is there anything in place that requires hospitals to disclose the disparities specifically, so then that way when women are identifying where they want to be, they can look and go, this is what the infant mortality rate is at Cedars, this is what it is at Torrance Memorial, this is what it is at Kaiser Permanente, and how do you take it so that systemically you have some accountability on an individual level, so that way you're not only looking at it at these grand scales of statistics without anybody ever having to take ownership of that differential. And I'm curious if that's happening at any point.
That's been a question at several convenings that I've been to, about, so you start implicit bias training, but then what? Like, how do you know if it's working?
Right.
How do you know if something is actually changing for the practice of the doctor? So I think that that's a conversation that's starting as that's really being pushed as a solution. But do you have anything else?
I met you at that conference. Cedars-Sinai, Kaiser Permanente, Southern West Los Angeles, St. Francis Medical Center. I believe UCLA was there, and we were talking about this issue. Maternal mortality, morbidity. It's the same. Every single one of those hospitals, the same. Some were county, some were private, and they had the same issues. And so I am of the mind that that article that came out in February of last year by Novia that talked about weathering, and that it is hard living in this body of color. And that it doesn't matter whether you go to Cedars-Sinai and you're going for the best care, you think, or you're coming to see me at Kaiser Permanente, that it starts with the vessel from the beginning. But it's not all ownership on us. It has everything to do with what are we providing. And clearly, it's disparate across different cultures. We've got to change that. We are talking about it at least, because if you don't talk about it, I know we can't do anything about it. So we certainly have a department that's on fire for making sure that we are doing what we can. But if you listed it, I think that you would find that differentially over the past, not 10 years, 15 years, 100 years, that since they have been documenting the differences between mortality amongst women and infant mortality, it has always been different in non-Hispanic white women, always. And it's so substantial that what's the difference? Well, the only difference 100 years ago or 10 years ago is what? Access to health care, which is institutionalized racism. It's hard to say it, but it's the truth. So how do we do something about that? Recognize it, train, these are just my thoughts, and then say that I am going to do it better, and then institute an evidence-based profile on the patients in order to try to do the best you can to get the best outcomes. That is, I think, at least a start. And from our maternal fetal medicine department, as well as many in different hospitals, including at UCLA, where one of my very good friends is the diversity chair. This is what they're doing. Yes.
Just quickly, because I want to get to,
Is it on? Okay.
Yeah.
And hold healthcare providers responsible for their bad behavior. Like there's no accountability. What's going to happen? Mm-hmm. Like you can go and do a bias training, but if you don't care about that, you can be on your phone during the bias training.
Right.
Hold them accountable for their bad behavior until people are held accountable for just being bad. I'm just thinking bad words in my head right now. But until it's not going to change.
Yeah. Okay, let's get to a few more questions.
Yes. I'm Dr. Patricia Pigman, internal medicine specialist. This is for Dr. Hines. Hi, how are you doing? I was reading maybe a couple months ago that they started taking statistics for black infant mortality in 1850. That was during slavery.
Yes.
Those stats were better than they are now. Why do you think so? Probably home birthing?
There's something to be said about what the midwives were doing. And that when we started to, I don't know if you'd say it was access healthcare, but that what could we get, because there was Morehouse and Meharry and Howard University, and there were places where we could not go. And so the best and the brightest were being trained in the same places, and we lived in the same communities. That I am not advocating for segregation. I didn't say that. What I'm saying is that there was an expectation that we are all we have. And so in order to be all we can be, we've got to do our best by one another. And so we held ourselves accountable. When we got access and we had the privilege of being able to get better health care and better food and live in better places, I don't know if all of a sudden we got better. So I don't have an answer, but there's no question, how is it possible that 100 years ago, when maternal morbidity and mortality was double what it is now, that our numbers have not improved, and yet everyone else's has gotten so much better? And the only thing that I find with that is not inherently in how intelligent and amazing people we are, but that just by virtue of the pigment of my skin, that I am being treated differently. That's all I can know that it is.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Sophia, and this might be a little off the charts, but that's the way I am. Speaking to accountability and also outreach and education, what about the other 50% of that gene pool? What is being done to also make young men or old men or whomever is attributable? Because to me, this is just my opinion, I think that that's very important, that they also know, that the male also knows, because it is his 50% or his sister or his mother or whatever, and I'm just wondering what's being done for that particular facet of our discussion.
Yeah, well, I will say that one of the stories that I did as part of this project that I was really drawn to for that exact reason, like what about the men, was I went to Ohio, where there's an organization called the Global Infant Safe Sleep Program, and they're using safe sleep as a way to start the conversation for men in starting trainings, partnering with Black fraternities all across the country to do training. So far, more than 5,000 men have been trained. So it's a training that starts with the conversation of, put the baby on the back, keep things out of the crib. But in that training, they're incorporating the information about racism, about the impact of chronic stress and how you can shield your partner from that. So that's one thing that I know that is going on, but that is also a question that I have a lot too of, what about the men? Reyna?
I know two in particular, and two, of course, is not enough, actually three. So we have Project Fatherhood, that is a dynamic program that reaches out to men in all neighborhoods, everywhere, prisons, all of that. And they get deep down, they go into high schools, so they're working with our men, that's one. A lot of these agencies that I also mentioned, like the Girls Club of LA, Black Infant Health does some of it, we bring the family in as well, and there are classes that are for men too. The parenting classes and the prenatal classes allow men too. So we're moving in that direction. We need to do more of it. We even have men on the action team that we have in partnership with the county. So men are getting involved. We have champions in Priska's story that you can look up. There are male champions there too. So the ball is rolling.
Okay.
Do I need to stand up? Oh, okay. Hi, my name's Erica. I live 2 minutes from here, actually. So my question, I guess I won't hold it. I'll just kind of go. Sorry, I feel like I'm like, oh. So I have a hypothesis or something I've been thinking a lot about, is about the prevalence of fibroids with Black women. and how, because the standard of care right now basically is a myomectomy, so if you have that procedure, it automatically puts you on a path to a surgical birth. And so when we think about the maternal health outcomes and also how much harder it is potentially to recover from a cesarean after having a baby and these infant health outcomes, I'm curious, and I'd love to hear from all three because I'm sure you all have different thoughts about it. Just like, how can we create more awareness around fibroids? I feel like something I've kind of been toying with is, is it worthwhile for like younger women to be having or asking for transvaginal exams to find out if they have them, to know, like, because I feel like if they're small, it's not so much of an issue when you're delivering, but if they're large, it's a problem. So if you find that they're small a few years before, like, we know that stress impacts fibroids. I just feel like it's just a thing I've really just been thinking about. So I'm just curious, any thoughts about fibroids and just awareness around that?
Yeah. Dr. Hines, or does anyone else have thoughts on that? And I want to try to get a few more questions. We're over our time, so I
My
get a few more
fibroids.
questions.
Fibroids are benign. That means non-cancerous, smooth muscle tumors of the uterus. They are more common amongst African American patients than any other ethnic group, although they are seen in all ethnic groups. They are the most common reason for hysterectomies and, of course, for myomectomy. The latest literature, at least according when I've just finished my boards last year, is that they may not, with regard to their size, be as impactful with regard to fertility and some of the symptoms that they get blamed for. But they certainly are more symptomatic at much earlier ages amongst African American women than in other groups. And therefore, that means intervention, both surgical and medical, is seen much earlier. So the question is, what can I do as a patient in anticipating the possibility, if I have fibroids, what do I do about them? First of all, the literature says about 4 to 5 centimeters is the size at which potentially they may become symptomatic. But if they are not located in what we call the true lining of the uterus, it is unlikely that they will have an impact on a pregnancy because it takes 2 to tango. I need an egg, I need a sperm, I need them to get where they need to go, I need them down the tubes, and I need them to come back as a conception, an implant. If the fibroid is nowhere near there, not a problem. However, can they have an impact on pregnancy, right, Debbie? Yeah. They can cause pelvic pain and a lot of discomfort during the pregnancy. They can sometimes make your life miserable. They can obstruct the birth canal depending upon how big they are, but for most patients, they do okay. So the research is not saying that just because a fibroid is present, or depending upon its size, that that's going to have a significant impact on a future pregnancy, or more importantly, on just pregnancy in general. And the reason is because age has been shown, paper after paper, to be more important with regard to predicting future fertility than anything else. So a 40-year-old years young woman with a normal uterus without fibroids, as an African American, for that matter, any woman, is at a higher risk for problems getting pregnant than if she were 30, period. If you add fibroids, which are common at that time, once again, their location is also, if they're not in the lining, it's unlikely to be the problem. That makes sense? But you are correct, depending upon where it is, if we operate on it, we compromise the muscle of the uterus, and that's what contracts during the pregnancy, and therefore potentially increases the risk for rupture or premature opening at that site. So your doctor, when you are advocating for yourself about your fibroids or symptomatic fibroids, you need to talk about this. But if the thought is, well, if I get rid of them before I attempt to get pregnant, is that going to help me? No, no, no. The issue is fibroids are to be addressed because you are symptomatic, not necessarily because we are thinking manipulating them is going to help with pregnancy. I wouldn't be in practice if I didn't get that question every day. And I'm one of the people in my department, they know I'm not a uterine snatcher, okay? So I do hysterectomies, but I try to find every evidence-based treatment protocol before I get to the point that I feel surgical intervention is what I call definitive. And even when we talk about that, they understand that fibroids do grow back. So the goal is to intervene with the appropriate treatment at the appropriate time. And yes, I am a believer that because they are hormonally dependent,
that when we are eating foods that are high in antibiotics and hormones injected, and we're not eating as many vegetables and drinking enough water, that we are contributing, the whole country, to our own demise. So I am a fan that the more nutritional foods you eat, I think you are a reflection of what you eat. I'm sorry, it was a long answer.
And our panelists will be sticking around a little after if you want to kind of go in deep with them more. We're going to take 2 more questions, and as I said, our panelists will be around.
Okay, my name is Carolyn. I happen to be a physician. I'm not an OBGYN, but I have some comments about this whole discussion. First of all, you can't talk about a healthy pregnancy without talking about a healthy body. You have to ask yourself, what's the state of your health before you start talking about outcomes with a pregnancy. Number 2, the United States is 32nd out of 35 developed countries in healthcare. So we spend twice as much as any other country in healthcare. So that tells you something. The system is not good as it is. And number 3, we're talking about racism here, and you have to go back to where racism comes from. And it's not just in your generation. It happened before your generation. And it was actually a political tool. Look up Beacon's Rebellion. Okay, that's when blacks and whites were getting together and they were trying to overthrow the government in Pennsylvania, the governor. And after that, England said, we can't have this. We've got to separate them. So they proclaimed everybody who was of white descent, you're white, whether you're Italian, Irish, whatever, you're white, you get certain privileges, and everybody else is black. And this country has continued to propagate those divides. Facebook, Google, they're doing it.
It certainly has been a long time in the making, and that's why it's taking so long to kind of address that. Did you have a question? I wanted just to get to some.
No, I just wanted to point out that you can't look at pregnancy in isolation. There's a time before pregnancy. You have to be healthy before, and it's all about what you eat. It boils down to what you eat and exercise.
Thank you. Okay, we have one more here.
Hello, my name is Kazaya Doran. I am currently a junior in high school, and as a 16-year-old, I was wondering what advice can you give to me, and also to directly to Dr. Hines, what medical advice can you give to me as an aspiring physician on how to become successful? Because just by your credibility, I find you very successful and very powerful. And I was wondering what advice can you give to me to become a successful physician?
Well, advice for an aspiring doctor. Yeah, let's just keep it short here.
There's a website. Ready? There's a
you
website.
Should connect later.
blackwomenphysicians.org. That is the website for the Association of Black Women Physicians. Go to the website, click on Sister to Sister, become a member, and you will directly be a part of a much larger organization for support of medical students and also part of Sister to Sister. And I'm the treasurer, so the $5 or $10, I'll know you joined, and then I'll get the newsletter out to you. But I'm excited for you, and I wish you all the best and study hard.
And I want to fold her question into kind of a final question here because, we did a lot of outreach to get young and kind of like a preconception audience here. The thinking for me being that if you find out about this in the doctor's office during a prenatal visit and learn that it's stress, like how is that going to help your stress of pregnancy? So it's important for people to know about this earlier in life. Unfortunate that it is a fact that you have to know about, but in thinking about words of encouragement for future moms, for people here who haven't yet started families, I want to just kind of get a final thought from each of you in thinking about this, but not being afraid, not being afraid of doing it when the time comes.
I'm still in a little bit of what Debbie said earlier. You can have a safe and sacred birth. It's possible. this is not meant to be doom and gloom. This is meant to put you on a trajectory. And if you've already had your children, this is for you to be a part of a community that teaches other people. Every single person in this room should be now, you're a little vessel that's going to spread this out to everybody else to let them know what is available to them, be it services, be it, your options for birth. There's so many different things that you can do. So I don't want anybody sitting here, especially our young aspiring physician, everyone who's of reproductive age that hasn't had children. This is not a conversation about what can't be. It's about what can be and what we're working towards and everybody that you have available to you. So I just want everybody to leave knowing that birth is sacred. It should be sacred. It should be a beautiful experience. It should be exactly what you want because that's what you have access to. And if you feel like you don't, there's so many people, even in this room, that can help you get there, that can help your sister, mother, daughter get there. So I just want everybody to understand birth is not supposed to be real sterile. Everybody's quiet. It's cold. That doesn't have to be the case. Even if you're having your baby in your hospital, you can create the environment that you want. So that's what I would leave with.
Dr. Hines? Or you are... Okay.
Healthy babies. Healthy babies make healthy families. I should say healthy mothers make healthy families and make healthy societies. And when we focus on women in a society and make sure that their health is taken care of, we don't have to worry about anything else.
Debbie?
I would say start with ownership, teaching your children ownership of their own bodies. Start when they go into a pediatrician's office to have that pediatrician stop, introduce themselves, ask permission to touch the body. Start to create the narrative that you can demand what you want when it comes to your own body so that by the time you get to an OB or a doctor or anybody in the healthcare field, you feel comfortable demanding that. You don't feel intimidated by a doctor. That starts when you take your babies, the day you take your babies to a pediatrician.
Well, thank you so much. A few things I want to do before we leave each other tonight. One is I know I see a lot of faces in the room of people who do work in this space, and so I just want to identify some people in the audience who are working on these issues. If you could just stand, and I can kind of point out some of you are. There are a lot of people who are working on this space. We have March of Dimes, Black Infant Health, LA County, First 5 LA. So, these are some of the people that you can start conversations with afterward. And there is a lot happening right now, and particularly in LA County, but also as we've had more cases that have gotten press, as celebrities have come out and shared their stories about birthing. This is a conversation that really feels different from people that I've been talking to who have been working on this for their entire lives. It does feel like there's a different conversation, and it does feel like in looking at that gap, there is more discussion about the role of racism in contributing to that gap. And one thing that I'm just always astounded by is the fact that there are so many of these women who have like a personal connection to this issue, who have been working on it for decades and still have hope. And so that's something that I think is really important. And as we have conversations like this, as we continue to increase awareness, hopefully there's a time when these stories will change, for journalists to be able to tell a different story. So I just want to thank everyone really for being here tonight. If you do have any words of encouragement that you thought of, we do have Quincy Surasmith. He's waving in the back there. He has a little recorder if you would like to record any thoughts that you want to leave after our conversation tonight. But I really just want to thank you all so much for being here. Reyna Granberry, Debbie Allen, Dr. LaTanya Hines. So thank you so much for this excellent panel. And And please do, stay, talk to each other, continue this conversation. I'll be writing up some things about this event with some other resources that we'll share with everyone who's here. And I also want to give a special thank you to LA84 for hosting us tonight, and also for KPCC's in-person team. We hope that you will all stay connected. Feel free to come talk to me. I'm here to continue this conversation. And thank you so much for a great evening. Thank you.